Former U.S. President George W. Bush recently dedicated his presidential library in Dallas, Texas. The ceremony included speeches by President Obama, former President Bush, and every other living former president. But none of the speeches so much as mentioned the Iraq War, the undertaking that dominated George W. Bush's presidency and will define his historic legacy. This omission might be due, at least in part, to the fact that Mr. Bush is now a convicted war criminal who dares not travel abroad out of fear of being arrested. In February 2011, Bush was forced to cancel a scheduled appearance in Geneva, Switzerland, after human rights groups filed a criminal complaint charging him with violating international treaties against torture. His trouble increased dramatically a year ago when Bush, along with former Vice President Dick Cheney, former Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld, and several other top Bush administration officials were convicted of war crimes in absentia by a special war crimes tribunal in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. The Kuala Lumpur War Crimes Commission was convened and conducted according to internationally recognized procedures and rules of evidence, and the week-long hearing ended with the 5-member panel unanimously delivering guilty verdicts. What is the significance of that tribunal? Is its verdict legally binding? Are there troublesome aspects to the idea that a foreign tribunal can sit in judgment of a U.S. president, whatever we may think of his actions? We will discuss these vitally important questions with Francis Boyle, a professor of international law at the University of Illinois College of Law. He served as a prosecutor at the tribunal. Professor, could you briefly describe how the Kuala Lumpur War Crimes Commission was convened?
Yes, back in 2004, due to the suggestion of the recently retired Prime Minister of Malaysia, Dr. Mahathir Mohamad, we had a big meeting out there and established the Perdana Peace Foundation and an initiative to criminalize war. Up until that point, war had been considered to be illegal under the terms of the United Nations Charter, but not criminal. So I suggested the next step would be to criminalize it. To make a long story short, the Kuala Lumpur War Crimes Tribunal was set up under Malaysian law, and it is chartered under Malaysian law.
Now, what were the charges and specifications against ex-President Bush and his fellow defendants?
Right. Well, there were 2 proceedings. The first one was against Bush and Blair for waging an offensive war against Iraq, a Nuremberg crime against peace. And I went out there for that prosecution, and we did convict them. The second set of charges was against Bush, Cheney, Rumsfeld, and their lawyers for torture and war crimes. And I went out there again. I was co-counsel for the prosecution team. The other lead prosecutor was Professor Gurdial Singh, one of Malaysia's top international law professors. And we were really the lead counsel on the prosecution. And we did obtain a conviction of Bush, Cheney, and all of their lawyers for torture and war crimes. When you engage in torture during wartime, in addition to being the international crime of torture, it also becomes a war crime. And when it's widespread and systematic, as was the case with Bush and the rest of them, a crime against humanity, which is quite serious.
So they were all convicted under these terms. So if they ever traveled to Malaysia, would they be imprisoned?
Well, we would make every effort possible to get them apprehended. Certainly, that would be decided under Malaysian law. But our convictions and proceedings that have now been filed with the International Criminal Court in The Hague are a prima facie basis to require any state where they travel to apprehend them, detain them, and open their own criminal investigation and proceedings against them.
Now, could you offer a brief summation of the actual evidence presented against Mr. Bush and his colleagues?
Well, as you know, the evidence of torture by Bush and the rest of them is comprehensive. It goes on for thousands and thousands of pages. I have an entire stack of documents over here that I think are at least 3 pages tall of all the evidence we submitted in this proceeding. And in addition, even more has come out. There's another report that just came out since these convictions a year ago that is quite extensive by a private, nonpartisan, bipartisan group that has also established torture. And then there is a Senate committee investigation that is quite comprehensive, apparently 4,000 pages long, that has yet to be released. I don't think there's any doubt at all as to the evidence of torture and war crimes by these individuals. It took us an entire week to introduce all this documentation into evidence and argue it. And then, of course, there was a case presented by amicus counsel appointed to represent Bush and the rest of them. So the proceedings were a week long.
And being tried in absentia, what steps were taken to extend the accused an opportunity to present a defense?
Yes, there were formal charges drawn up for each and every one of them. They were served on the United States Embassy in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, with a notice of the proceedings and a request that these individuals show up to present a defense. They did not respond. So at that point, the War Crimes Tribunal did appoint a barrister, trial lawyer there in Malaysia to defend them. He put together a team of lawyers, and they put on what defense they could. They tried very hard. I was somewhat sympathetic with them because the evidence was so overwhelming. But he and his team did the best job they could. What can I say?
Professor, you mentioned that your group scared Bush out of going to Switzerland and that you tried 3 times to get him while he was visiting Canada. Could you tell us a little more about these incidents, particularly what happened in Canada?
Well, there I worked with a Canadian lawyer and organization up there 3 times to prosecute Bush for torture and war crimes, twice while he was sitting president, once when he had retired as president. On the first 2 proceedings, we needed the consent of the Attorney General of Canada to proceed against him because he was a sitting president. They refused to give it, which meant Canada was in violation of its obligations under the Geneva Conventions and the Torture Convention. The third time, the Canadian government blocked the prosecution. But my guess is Bush will be reluctant to go back to Canada. Cheney was going to visit up there. We made it known we were going to go after Cheney. He didn't go up to Canada. As for Switzerland, that was my own initiative prior to these proceedings. I had filed a criminal complaint with the International Criminal Court against Bush, Cheney, Rumsfeld, Ashcroft, Condoleezza Rice, and Tenet for their policy of extraordinary rendition, which is a euphemism for torture and enforced disappearances of human beings, which in this case constitutes war crimes and crimes against humanity. This complaint came to the attention of Swiss human rights NGOs, and when they got word that Bush was going to Geneva to give a public speech. They went to one of the Bush parliamentarians who made a public demand to the Swiss Minister of Justice that if Bush showed up in Switzerland, he should be apprehended and prosecuted for violating the Swiss implementing legislation, for the domestic implementing legislation for the International Criminal Court. That got back to Bush, and I take it his lawyers advised him not to go to Switzerland, so he did not go.
So what is the significance of these guilty verdicts? It appears as though they may be having a material impact on Bush and his associates. Is that in fact the case?
Yes, my understanding is Bush and the rest of them are now seeking legal advice and counsel as to anywhere they might plan to travel in the world. You have to understand, we have an entire army of lawyers out there with detailed documentary evidence in a case now to be filed in any country in the world where these individuals show up, demanding that those governments take them into custody and open their own legal proceedings against them. Some governments do not recognize in absentia proceedings, so they would have to start the whole thing all over de novo. That would be fine with us. We would be happy to cooperate with any government. We have a whole dossier against these individuals.
Now, so, to be absolutely fair, we'd be remiss if we didn't mention the current administration, because President Obama has undertaken a campaign of extrajudicial killing through drone strikes of American citizens overseas. Now, this is a violation of the U.S. Constitution, federal law, and customary international law. Are you planning on prosecuting President Obama while he is still in office, or will you wait until he finishes his term?
Yes, I've already condemned this behavior by President Obama. This is murdering United States citizens abroad, which is a serious violation of United States federal criminal law. He should be prosecuted for this at home. It's also an impeachable offense in violation of the Fifth Amendment to the United States Constitution, guaranteeing due process of law. He should be impeached for that. And as a matter of fact, if you research the history of impeachment, most constitutional scholars agree that a sitting president can be prosecuted for murdering United States citizens, let alone impeached. These are also war crimes that he has committed, and since it's widespread and systematic, crimes against humanity. So yes, President Obama can and should be prosecuted and impeached here in the United States and abroad. The problem with doing it abroad is that while he is a sitting president, there is a terrible world court decision basically saying sitting presidents have absolute immunity from criminal prosecution. The only exception there arguably would be genocide. So I don't see much point in going after President Obama now while he is in office, though we could try. We tried twice with Bush up in Canada, but got nowhere. So it really depends on, the circumstances of the case, target of opportunity, where he's going, my getting access to human rights activists and lawyers in those countries to consider these cases, because the international law is the same. But how international law gets incorporated into the domestic legal orders of every country in the world is different. And so that is what we have to focus on.
I want to ask a question about the reality here that we have a former President Bush, we have a current President Obama who are blatantly violating domestic law, international law. What does that tell you about the state of affairs in America and the world? What should our viewers take away from that reality?
This republic is in a constitutional crisis where we've had two presidents in a row, Bush Jr. And Obama, engaging in massive constitutional law violations that I don't have time to detail here. I did write a book called Tackling America's Toughest Questions, and you will see Obama is continuing all of the Bush policies and is even compounding them, such as asserting the right to murder United States citizens, even here in the United States, which is absolutely appalling. So we, I'm afraid, are a few steps removed from a police state. Indeed, look at what Obama did and his hench people did there in Boston. Since Boston is part of your viewing market, I lived in Boston for 7 years. I love that city and that metro area. Basically, they put it under de facto martial law. And that is what we face here in America, rolling or sequential de facto martial law all over the country. So this is a very serious and dangerous situation for the future of our republic and our Constitution and a commitment to the rule of law. And I would point out, Obama is worse than Bush. He was after me at Harvard Law School. He taught constitutional law at the University of Chicago, where I went as an undergraduate. He knows exactly what is wrong with what he is doing. Unlike Bush, who is not a lawyer, had to rely on advice of lawyers who, of course, told him whatever he wanted to do.
Well, let me ask you this. If he knows, in fact, what he's doing is wrong, why does he continue to do it?
He doesn't care. Once you become president of the United States, as we've seen, it goes to your head. If you read all the speeches that Obama gave while he was in the Senate and then running for the president, criticizing the Bush practices, it's very clear he was directly on point and correct with all his criticisms of Bush. But once he became president, he concluded he was the dictator of the world and dictator of the United States of America. It's that simple. That power goes to your head.
So what can the average American do? Obviously, you've mentioned there's a constitutional crisis here in the United States. We have administration after administration violating the rights of their own citizens, drone strikes occurring, martial law breaking out in cities across the country, chasing after one person, in Boston, as you mentioned. What can the average American do to bring those constitutional rights back into play and hold our leaders accountable? What can the average American do?
Well, the first thing they have to do is inform themselves as to what is really going on. The mainstream news media is completely worthless, but nothing but a propaganda belt for whatever administration is in power. You have to take to the internet, you have to inform yourself, and then you have to get organized to assert your rights, your First Amendment rights, which, by the way, Obama is attempting to subvert. This attack on the Associated Press and this recent Fox News Media fellow, not that I have anything in common with Fox News Media, this is, I think, an impeachable offense under the First Amendment to the United States Constitution. But no one is talking about that. You have to demand that your elected officials put in a bill of impeachment against Obama and Holder at least. You have to get organized in your communities to oppose these matters. We still had freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, civil resistance. If we don't start using the rights we still have now, America is going to become just like Boston was during the lockdown. That's the future of America right there, what Obama and his hench people did to Boston.